Hi, my name is Kim Rayner, and I want to welcome you to episode 12 of All About Spirits Life After Cancer. And before we officially get into this episode, I want to welcome you to 2018 and to thank you for being here. And before I actually start the episode, I just want to mention one of the things that I learned when I was going through the cancer process and after the cancer process is having a balanced life is really important. I work hard, I play hard, and I take time to rest in the process. And the last couple of weeks, Christmas and New Year's Day, I took the time to rest. I spent time over the last couple of weeks with family and friends, and I spent some time in quiet contemplation. And I'm grateful to know that that is a huge part of making sure that I stay healthy and sane and all the things that go along with being healthy and sane. So today's episode is how cancer and my cat's terminal diagnosis became the catalyst for my spiritual transformation. And I'm going to take it back in time to 2008 to really talk about how my life became all about spirit and how it transformed and how I really do look at everything as if it is a part of spirit. So in the process of my cancer journey, it was 2008, and it was probably March or maybe early April, and I had three cats. I was living with my son and my three cats, and the cat that I'm going to talk about, her name was Flip, and she was probably 15 years old at the time, and I had gotten her as a feral cat when she was about 6 months old. And I had been through the end of a relationship with her. I went through career changes with her. I went through my cancer diagnosis with her. And I probably cried a million tears into that little girl's fur. And I told her lots of stories that I never told with anybody else. So she was a buddy for me. And in March or April, she started not eating very well, and she started losing weight. I started noticing that she was getting kind of lethargic, and I was concerned about her. At that time, I was done with my chemotherapy, I was done with my surgeries, and on the outside, I looked like things were fairly normal. I looked like I was healthy, I looked like things were okay. On the inside, not so much. I was pretty much a hot mess. I was hanging on by a fingernail most of the time. I was going through some anxiety and some depression. And at that point, my finances were really starting to unravel. And I was realizing that I was going to lose everything that I had worked my life for. And I felt pretty insecure. And I felt like, security in general was non-existent. And I was also in what became my last full semester of college. I had been on a 4.0 track, and I was going to lose that this semester. And I was really struggling with that. So when my cat started getting sick, it was like, oh, are you kidding me? This is one more thing to add to the list. And, I waited a little while to see how she was going to do, how she was going to fare. And she ended up not doing very well. And the week before Easter, she actually stopped eating altogether. And I was really concerned. So I called the vet, who was a family member and lived about 45 minutes from me. And I called him and said, hey, this is what's going on with my little girl. And he said, you should bring her out. It doesn't sound good. So I brought her over there, and he looked at her and said, yeah, she's really dehydrated. There's definitely stuff going on. We're going to keep her overnight. We're going to give her fluids, and we're going to run some blood tests on her to see, if we can figure out what's going on. He said, I'll keep her, and then I'll call you in the morning. I was like, okay, fine. So he called. And when he called, he said, she's a pretty sick little girl, and I don't think that she's going to survive this. So I can go ahead and put her down. And he said her kidneys are failing, and she's really pretty sick. And I trusted him. He'd been my vet for a really long time, helped me through lots of animals, and I trusted him, and I thought, man, I didn't say goodbye to her, and Nick didn't get a chance to say goodbye to her, so you can't just put her to sleep. I'll come out and pick her up. I'll bring her home, and I'll make her as comfortable as I can, and I'll bring her back on Easter. I'm going out there anyways, and you can put her down on Easter Sunday. So he said, okay. I went home, and I went out there, and I picked her up. and I brought her home, and I came home with an IV bag full of intravenous fluid just to be able to give her fluid to help keep her kidneys flushed. And she hadn't eaten anything in a fairly long time, and she was pretty skinny and really losing weight. So when I got her home, I tried to give her, sardines and tuna and all the other things that, cats would really normally love to eat. She wasn't having any part of it. Not chicken broth, nothing. She wasn't having any part of that stuff. So, I spent the weekend in tears figuring out, how am I going to let her go and saying goodbye to her and transitioning because, I know that that's part of life and I love her enough to let her go. And so transitioning for all of that. So Easter Sunday morning, I get up and I'm eating breakfast and I'm sad and I'm crying and I have a bowl of cereal and all of a sudden she walks up to me and she puts her little paws on my leg and she goes, "Preow, preow." And it's like, oh my goodness, that's like the sign for her for, I want some milk. You're eating breakfast and I want some milk. So I put the bowl down on the floor and she drank. She drank the milk and I thought, man, maybe I'm making a big mistake. And we know, if you are a pet lover, we know how it is to let our pets go. So I sat with it and I thought, I don't even know what to do with this. And I decided, you know what? I'm not going to put her down. She ate today and maybe she's getting better. Maybe she's getting ready to bounce back. So I didn't have her put to sleep that day. I called my vet and I said, I'm not coming. This is what's going on. And he said, well, keep giving her the fluids and, maybe there's a miracle at hand. And I said, okay. And, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, my dad had a stroke on Easter weekend as we were preparing to go and spend the weekend with him. And, when my dad had his stroke, we thought, he was in ICU for a long time and they thought, we don't know if he's going to survive this or not. And he did survive it. And his quality of life may not have been, what other people would have considered perfect, but for him, he had an okay quality of life. And I thought, man, if his doctors were wrong, maybe my vet was wrong too. Maybe people don't know everything. And my dad and I had a really wonderful relationship. It was a very spiritual process. It was healing and loving and nurturing. And I thought, wow, maybe there's something, maybe there's more to it than this. Maybe there's something going on with this that I can, that I need to take a look at. So I also started thinking, man, my doctors gave me a prognosis and a diagnosis that's not very positive, not very hopeful. And I thought, well, maybe they're not right too. And so I started looking at well, where might be other signs coming from? Where might there be some hope in all of this? And I did find hope. So I started pulling on that thread of hope. And I had already been looking at healing and looking at medicine and looking at, doing all the stuff my doctors were saying. But I thought, man, maybe I need to start looking at things beyond human and beyond what people can take care of and what people can fix. So the first thing I started noticing was, man, I wear an awful lot of green. And I looked to see, well, what's the spiritual meaning behind green? And I found out that the color green is for healing. And I thought, well, man, I'm going through all of this stuff. No wonder I'm wearing so much green. And I started paying attention to the other colors, a lot of red, which was about survival, and a lot of orange, which was about emotions. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So then, I started looking at everything that was crossing my path, right? I started looking at the wild animals that passed, and I was seeing tons of rabbits all over the place. And, I learned that in the Native American culture, rabbits mean fear. And I had an incident with a dragonfly, and I'll tell you about that in another episode. But dragonflies mean that things aren't always as they seem. So I started looking and poking around at all of the different ways that spirituality might play into my life. And I realized that the things that I was recognizing with colors also had a similarity or a thread that tied to the things that were going on with animals. And I started looking up the symptoms that I was experiencing in my body where, I'd get a scratchy throat and I'd think, oh, what's going on with my throat? And I went to see what scratchy throat meant. And it's like, oh, is there something that I need to be saying to people that I'm keeping as a secret and I'm not saying? And it's like, wow, that was really interesting for me. And that too became spiritual. So I started seeing all of these threads all over the place that said, man, Kim, whatever is going on in your life, it has a spiritual component to it. It has a spiritual part to it. And that was really interesting for me. So I started looking at everything. I started looking for the spiritual meanings in everything. The words that I spoke, the emotions that I was feeling, the colors that I was choosing. And when I put that lens of everything is about spirit over my life, it became a really different life for me. Instead of feeling like my life was a sentence that I somehow needed to endure, it somehow became kind of a mystery and a wonder that was filled with excitement. It's like, oh, what does this mean? And I learned that as I unraveled this stuff, as I started, unpacking some of this stuff, that wow, I had some impact and influence over what was going on in my life. And that was really exciting to me too. And I'm not going to lie to you and pretend that this process was easy. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend that it was always fun, because the truth is, in the beginning, it was painful and it wasn't fun and it wasn't easy. I had to unpack a lot of history, a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts and ideas and beliefs that I had carried with me for a long time. And I had to find a way to reframe them. And I did that. It gave me the opportunity to take responsibility for my life. It gave me the opportunity to be hopeful again for my life. And then to finally, ultimately make some changes in my life that have brought me to a place where it's really good for me today. I have a really wonderful life. I don't necessarily drive a fancy car, and I don't live in some big fancy house somewhere, and I'm not living the life that I thought that I was going to live before. But I tell you, I have a really, really good life. I get to work doing the work I love. I get to spend time with people who are on a spiritual path with me. I get to look at life as if it is a journey of spirit. And everything that happens to me either teaches me how to be better at what I'm doing, or it teaches me how to unpack the stuff that I've believed all my life and make it be something different. So my invitation and my hope to you for 2018 is to really offer you the opportunity to look at your life through the lens of spirit, to really invite you to take a look and say, wow, what are some of the patterns that keep repeating in my life? What are some of the things that keep showing up over and over again? And how does that play out for me? How can I unpack that? And if you don't understand the language of spirit, I would love to be able to help you figure out exactly what things mean and what they mean to you, because what they mean to you might be different than what they mean to me. So until we meet again next Monday, I hope that you have a really great week and that life treats you well. Thanks for being here today.